Dum. Ay, ay, ay. Yada da 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 dum. Ay, ay, da, ay, da. Yada da 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 dum. I yada da 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 dum. I yada da 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 dum. Oh, I yada da 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 dum. Oh, ay, ay, da, 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 dum. Ay, ay, da, 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 ya, da, 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 ya, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Oh, ay, 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 da, 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 ya, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Oh, ay, ay, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Oh, 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 ay, ay, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Ay, ay, da, 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 ay, ay, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Ay, 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 da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Oh, ay, ya, da, 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 ya, da, da, ya, da, da, dum. Boker Tov, good morning. I know Wisdom Wednesday on a Tuesday is weird, but Rabbi Jay was doing something, and tomorrow the girls have an appointment, and so we just switched days, and so here we are on this day, learning a little Torah and connecting in ways that we know work best. So this morning, so weird. I knew what I was going to talk about tomorrow. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And then I had an experience this morning that directly connected with what I wanted to teach about tomorrow, unbeknownst to me that this was going to happen. Sometimes these things just happen. So this morning, Ellis was twisting and turning and getting ready for camp and just like moving at a snail's pace, but also just like very silly. And maybe it's just because Emma was here to take care of the girls, and he loves to put on a show for her, whatever it was. So to get him out of the house on time, I said, oh, Ellis, do you want to go to the recycling center? Because he loves the recycling center. He loves to drop boxes off there, whatever it is, plastic, glass, blah, blah, blah. So he's like, yes, I want to go there so bad. And I'm like, okay, awesome. So we go there. And he does this thing. He throws all the boxes in. He talks to the guy. And we get back in the car. So he gets in his seat. And now I'm going to my seat. And I say to the guy that works there, who we know, I said, stay hydrated. Because it's hot out there. And he's already sweating. And it's before 9 a.m. I get in the car. I close the door. And Ellis says, Ema, do you think that he has enough water for today? So I said nothing. I said to the guy about being hydrated. I didn't say the word water. I didn't say any of that. I just said, stay hydrated. I got in the car. Do you think that the guy has enough water for today? Or do you think that we should get him some? I said, no, Ellie, I think he said that he has a lot of water. He said, oh, don't worry. I'm going to drink a lot. I plan to, or something he said. And so he said, okay. But you could see he was still thinking, of course. And he said, it's really important that we drink a lot of water, especially when it's really hot outside. Because water is important to our bodies so that they can work. And if we get dehydrated, we really feel sick. Mommy used to say that. And so it was like a little early for a mommy used to say that kind of comment for me, but it was also humbling to know that he's A, thinking about her, B, continuing to share the lessons and stories. But in true Ellis form, it was really a science lesson. It wasn't about mommy told him that. It was like, wait a second, I use the word hydrate, dehydrate, and water all together, knowing that water is what is needed for the body. And so yes, he's 3.5 years old, and yes, I always feel weird sometimes, sharing the stories, because it's not about his intelligence. It's just about the way that he pieces things together when you're least expecting it, or the realization that you better shut your mouth sometimes, because some of the things he might repeat or use again or against you could absolutely come to be. So this brings me to this moment, which is talking about this week's parsha, this week's portion, and you'll see the correlation, which is real interesting. So it's Parsha Chukat. A famous big biblical story. Some know it, some don't. The red heifer, the thirst in the desert, whatever. Maybe we know it, maybe we don't. It seems like we know lots of Torah, lots of Bible stories that are throughout the year. But once it gets to Pesach, like once the story of Exodus happens, we know less of it. Or as it gets closer to summer, depending on how the year falls out, perhaps the stories are just different and not as noteworthy, or, maybe it is that you focus on the most important ones. I'm not really sure what it is or why we know certain ones and not others. And so if you hear the girls screaming in the background, don't worry, they're fine. They were just getting dressed after a bath, and they hate that. So Parshat Chukat. Moses strikes a rock and therefore is barred from entering the land of Canaan. There's not a lot of details about why or what happened, but there's a lot of commentary about the punishment. Like, you are not going where you thought you were going because you struck a rock. You strike a rock because you were angry at the people because they were complaining. Did you strike a rock because, well, in other times you strike a rock and water flows? We're not really sure. But towards the end of this 40-year journey through the wilderness, the people are whining, shocker, grumbling, again, about their thirst. Right? The first one we had was at Mount Moriah, when it was, the water was tasting bitter and they didn't like that. And the story of the manna and the double manna on Shabbat. So they're complaining. Well, they're complaining. 40 years in the desert, wouldn't you be complaining too? I have like 40 days of heat we haven't even had. I had 4 days of oppressive heat. I'm complaining too. We all complain. But 40 years journeying through a desert, sweating, it's terrible. And they're thirsty. So what does Moses do? Moses and Aaron consult with God, who tells them to speak to the stone, and it will bring forth water. But Moses instead berates the people. Listen up, rebels, and decides to strike the rock. So the listen up, rebels is, people are complaining. So is it rebellious to complain? No, I think if you're thirsty and you're complaining, it doesn't seem so rebellious. But commentators, rabbis, people, God, thought that Moses' action of striking the rock when he was told to do something else, which was speak to the rock, perhaps maybe he was the rebel, going against. These people are pissing him off, so he's like, I'm going to show you. You're a rebel. Let me hit this rock and see what happens. But he strikes the rock and water comes forth. It happens. The water comes forth and the people drink, and God punishes Moses and Aaron. Now, God punishes. So, if you actually read Torah, God punishes a lot. But if you actually interpret Torah, or if you interpret your own feelings of God or not, a punishing God doesn't seem like the kind of God that somebody would want to attach to, right? Doesn't seem like something that works for us. But in this parsha, God punishes Moses and Aaron at saying, because you didn't trust in me enough to make me holy before the people, Like God said, do this, and this will happen. But instead, you spoke out. Your action wasn't the action that I gave you. And so what? You know what? You are going to be punished because you failed to demonstrate my holiness to the people. And so they are now punished. For more than 2,000, I'm going to guess, years, rabbinic commentators, have struggled to understand the nature of Moses' sin. Like, where is it coming from? Was he acting out of anger? Is it a sin? Did he do anything really bad or not? Was the punishment of not being allowed to go into the land of Canaan, was it equal action to punishment? Was it an effort to make Moses understand that he failed to do what God had wanted before the people, and so therefore he's going to have consequences? But Moses' failure to make God holy before the Israelites resided in this misidentification of rebellious. Rebellious? Were the people really rebellious? They were complaining. Was Moses rebellious because he didn't do what God said? Were there complaints about the lack of water needed to be honored with compassion rather than frustration, as Moses displayed? Though Moses had witnessed, been part of, been the recipient of 40 years of so much complaining from the same group of people, their demand for water needed to be considered something new. Like, each complaint is its own complaint. Instead of saying, oh, for 40 years I've been listening to this, I'm tired of it, you're a rebel, I'm over you, I'm not listening to God, I'm not listening to you, I'm done. Was that why he was punished? It's been said that, you know what, Moses should have looked at this as a new complaint. Not the same complaint he was holding on to from years before, or all of the ones leading up to it. His frustration and fatigue and being, I'm done with this, wasn't a good enough excuse for the people requesting simple water in a desert. His refusal to do what God asked, his refusal to give the people what they wanted, though they in turn got the water after he struck the rock. But this refusal of compassion for the people represented failure. Failure because they failed to make God look good. Like Moses should have said, well, God said I should do this and you'll be rewarded with the water that you so desperately need, and God looks good. But instead it looks like God looks bad because, well, Moses was the conduit between the people and God. How do we recognize thirst? Right? Is it as simple as Ellis saying to the guy, like, I hope you have enough water because it's so hot out here. I see you're working outside. I see you're sweating. Don't get dehydrated. But in our own lives, how do we recognize thirst? We're surrounded, bombarded by the needs of others. Sometimes we can't even see what we need for ourselves because it is oppressive, like heat, when it's always about the needs of others. And so as we read, as we understand better the story of the thirst of the Jews in the desert, we're also faced with the thirst of the people in our world. Dehydration is the cause of death for nearly 2 million people either dehydration, malnutrition, microbial diseases from water and food, and poor sanitary conditions. It's only a iota of human need. Thirst, water, right? The Israelites were just asking for water. Here they are in the desert, sweating, walking, traveling, being not sure of their future, and all they're asking for something is so simple like water, just like the faces of humanity that are asking for all of those things that they need, like water, like food, like shelter, like peace, like a place to be their authentic selves. And we, each day, struggle to negotiate the aspects of thirst in the circles that we exist in. Like Moses, we have pain, we have loss, we have journeyed too far with not enough resources, with not enough support. We're overwhelmed by the neediness of those who face us. And for these reasons, and so many more, we don't always give. We don't always give because we don't always feel like we can. You know, it's like you know that people are starving, you know that people are thirsty, you know that people need shelter, you know that, people need things to keep them safe. But it's hard to measure what we can bring, what we can do. Everybody's hungry. I can't feed the whole world kind of thing. It's too much. So I don't even want to be involved. Like Moses, we've often had the occasion to hear others' grievances. Grievance doesn't mean something against you. Sometimes we're just hearing it. We're hearing people's grievances. In my old career, years and years ago, the compliance officer, all she did was hear complaints and grievances. And after a while, she started thinking like, oh my God, it starts to feel like all of these grievances are about me, when I have nothing to do with it other than to hear the grievance of another. And she started to think like, oh, these people are just greedy. They just want more, or they just don't want to do or conform to what is supposed to be, and so they act out. I can't take it anymore. I don't want to listen to it anymore. And maybe Moses felt like that. It's enough already. Shut up. We're all out here together. We're all struggling and suffering. We're done with this. We're over it. Perhaps we have turned away unwillingly or unable to face these needs of others with an open hand because we are tired. We too are thirsty for change. We want to be filled with something different. Our own needs and our own thirsts shouldn't be denied because someone else has thirst and needs. But still our responsibility to one another to make God look good in the eyes of another, but it's also to make God look good in our own eyes. It makes it incumbent, that word is so weird, upon us. I think I've only used that like 3 times in my whole life. Upon us not to deny the thirst of those who turn to us for help. It's to see and to listen and to identify what a person's really saying, what a person really is thirsting for. Maybe we can learn to bring God's holiness to other people. Last night, a few people were here, my sisters and my might as well be sisters. the group chat of my everyday existence. We're here. And someone, we're all Jews and there's one that isn't. And she said, oh, my therapist said to me that she's so happy that, Rabbi Jen has her faith through all that she's going through. And this friend says, oh, I'll let her know you think that. But she turned to me and said, I don't know. I think I'd be I am so angry with God. And so we had to have a little lesson about what I think God is and not the punishment of how God punished Moses. And the conversation went like, some Jews, some people think that God is there somewhere above, controlling the strings like a marionette puppet. Everything is ordained, right? The rhythm of time and existence. And all belief and not belief in God is personal. It's your own connection. It's your own understanding. It's your own, however you see God in moments. But when bad things happen, all of a sudden people become holy. People become connected to God. Someone else said, no, and I know this is a traditionalist kind of Jew for tradition's sake, but perhaps not a non-believer in God. And I said, well, as I understand it, or as I connect to it, if I thought that God was controlling all that was going to happen in the world, then I'd be pretty pissed off a lot of times. But instead, I find God in tradition, in ritual, in showing up in community, in doing good in the world. It's more by action that I connect to God rather than God as some person, some entity, some spirit, some whatever that looks like that's saying, this is what's going to happen tomorrow. Oh, or the people that say, oh, she's in a better place. Get out of here. It's not what I want to hear. It's not what I believe. That's not how it works. So when we think about punishment, when we think about God, when we think about what we're thirsting for more connection, more rootedness in tradition, an idea that on this narrow path through the world where we are bound to have mountains and molehills, where we are bound to have bridges that look like they are broken in between, as we walk through the wilderness of what life is, that we need to recognize the fullness of humanity, the fullness of those who journey with us, those who are thirsting for the same and for different, to open our ears, to open our hearts, to show up in ways that we never thought were possible, to remind ourselves that we're all thirsty for something, but we're thirsty for different things. But our thirst is collective, and no one should be punished, not even Moses and Aaron, should be punished because the God I believe in is not a punishing God. And if you are, I don't want to say religious, more traditional, I don't know what the words are. If your belief is that God is controlling this way of life, that's your belief and that's okay. It is to realize that we believe differently and we believe the same. And somewhere in the middle we meet or we don't. But as my understanding it is we're all thirsting in this world. Thirsting for something. Thirsting for better, for water, for love, whatever it is. But reminding ourselves that on that narrow bridge, we're doing it together. For we are one human family, one heart of abundant love. We love you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning at 12:30. Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael, Am Yisrael Chai. 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 Od Avinu Chai. Thank you for being with me together. Amy, Rabbi Jay, Reb Tova, Fern, Debbie, Lita, Elisa, Amy. For all of you, Amy and Amy, it's multiple. For all of you, let's keep doing what we're doing, even on the hardest days, even on the days where we are so parched. Let us show up for one another. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 10:30.